Hey guys, this is Waj, and in this video I'm going to be doing a direct comparison between the BlackBerry Z10 and the Nexus 4 from Google. Now there are some differences and advantages between each phone as you'll learn in this video, so stay tuned if you're interested in either getting one of these phones or if you're just interested in see how they compare with each other. So let's go ahead and start the comparison between the Nexus 4 and the BlackBerry Z10. Now, in terms of physical dimensions, the Z10 is a bit smaller than the Nexus 4. The Nexus 4 measures 133.9 millimeters in height, 68.7 millimeters in width, which is definitely a bit taller and wider than the Z10, but overall, they are very similar looking phones, and as you can see right over here, they kind of take up the same footprint. Interestingly, they are pretty much identically the same in terms of thickness. The Nexus 4 is only 0.1 millimeters thicker, and they're pretty much identical in terms of weight too. So if you were to pick up both phones, you would understand that they're pretty much the same physical dimension and weight. Another common thing between these two devices is the screen. They have the exact same resolution of 1280 by 768. Of course, the Nexus 4 does have the larger screen, which brings down its PPI ratio to 318 versus the Z10's 356. Now, physically side by side, these displays are very, very similar looking. Even though the Nexus 4 is not as high density in terms of pixel per square inch, it does show everything in very, very high crisp resolution and definition. The colors are very saturated and bright, and really there's not a huge difference between the displays. Screen size is always a personal preference. I prefer the larger screen size because it gives me more room to easily navigate through different applications and to be more accurate in terms of my text selection. But the Z10 does also have a great capacitive touchscreen like the Nexus 4 and is fairly easy to work with. And again, it's going to be more of a personal choice of what fits better in your pocket and what you like to use on a day-to-day basis in terms of screen size. Now, in terms of internal hardware, we do find a difference between the two smartphones. The Nexus 4 is running a quad-core processor running at 1.5 gigahertz, which is a little bit faster than what you would find on the Z10, which is a dual-core Snapdragon processor. They're both using Snapdragon technology, and they both have 2 gigs of RAM. So they're very similar in terms of hardware, besides the fact that the Nexus 4 does have a higher-end processor. And you can definitely see this difference when we start loading up different applications, open up different web pages. You'll notice that the Nexus 4 does open up things a little bit quicker and is a little bit more smoother when opening up different applications and using it on a day-to-day basis. But there's not a huge difference. Of course, the OS on the Nexus 4 is very, very mature and very good. And we're in the early stages of BlackBerry making these new smartphones. So they'll definitely work out the kinks and make the OS a little bit more fluid and up to the specification of what you'd see on Android. The Z10 definitely has one advantage over the Nexus 4, and that's to do with its internal antenna. So it has LTE speeds, which is definitely going to be faster if that's available to you than the HSDPA Plus that's in the Nexus 4 right now. But of course, if you don't have LTE available to you in your area or on your carrier, then it really makes no difference. The battery life on these two smartphones are also fairly similar. You'll notice that the Nexus 4 has a larger 2100 milliamp hour battery, which is definitely larger than the 1800 milliamp hour battery that's in the Z10. But the funny thing is, in most real world cases, you really have similar results. Based on some of our tests and some of the tests that other people are doing online, we're getting about 8 hours of talk time on both phones. Now, there is a difference. If you enable the LTE on the Z10, you might get a little bit better battery life if you're just on the 3G standard speeds. Same thing with the Nexus 4. All these things are very dependent upon how you use your phone in terms of brightness, all these things. But if you put things on average and if you're pretty conservative with it, you pretty much get around 8 to 10 hours on the Nexus 4 and about 8 hours on the Z10 on the LTE speeds. Of course, however, the big advantage with the Z10 is the fact that the battery is fully removable, so you can always add more batteries if you're in a long day usage. And also you can expand the memory up to 64 gigs via a micro SD card. So really big advantages because the Nexus 4 has none of those features. Now let's take a look at the cameras on both these two devices. We'll start with the front-facing camera of the Nexus 4 and the Z10. When we go to the rear-facing camera, they're pretty much identical in terms of most aspects. I think the Nexus 4 definitely renders colors a bit more smoothly, and it has a better lens on the camera too. And the stills are a lot better on the Nexus 4, a lot more dynamic range than the Z10. They both have the same 8 megapixel camera for stills, but I think, to me personally, the Nexus 4 looks a tiny bit better on the stills on the rear-facing camera. But overall, very similar cameras, and really are great cameras for smartphones these days. But other than that, guys, if you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video, make sure to leave it on a comment down below. Make sure to also give us a thumbs up. That really helps us out. And subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. As well as, if you haven't seen our Facebook, we have a pretty cool Facebook page that will link to the end of the video. So make sure to check that out. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. And we'll see you later. Take care. Okay, so let's get right into the comparison between the BlackBerry Z10 and the iPhone 5. So the first thing that we'll take a look at is the actual physical dimensions of both these devices. Now, as you can see right over here, you'll see that the BlackBerry Z10 is just a bit taller and wider than the iPhone 5, measuring 130 millimeters